So we had a lot going on during the winter meetings and a lot of trades to catch up on, which I promise you we will do here on the call up early next week because we want to give the Garrett Crochet trade its due. We want to talk about the Andres Jimenez, Spencer Horwitz, which then turned into Spencer Horwitz to the Pirates and the prospects going everywhere there too. There's a lot there too. I want to talk about that. We're going to break that all down next week, I promise, because today is dedicated to the Rule 5 draft. And you
Yeah.
always knew that we were going to give you a full episode on the Rule 5 draft. Of course, I'm Aram, he's Jack. And before I forget, because I want to make sure I get this out there, because we're going to be doing a live box break. Full case of 2024 Bowman draft. Portion of the proceeds go to Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital. That is today, December 12th. We're doing that this evening. You can still bid on the items up till about I think 6 p.m. if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those folks that listens to the episode right away, thank you so much for just listening to the episode right away. But also, you will be able to maybe get this in on the buzzer if you want to go kind of get into this break. It's a team break of the full case, so you could buy any of the 30 teams. They're all auctioned on eBay, and the link to those auctions is in the episode description. Sorry, Jack, had to get that all out. But the Rule 5 draft, you nailed Cooper Bowman.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think either of us nailed Shane Smith, like the number one
No,
overall pick.
no,
We didn't have on
which
our
is funny.
big board.
That's a name that came up, and for whatever reason, I just like in one ear out the other.
Yeah.
Just was like, whatever.
Understood. It's a very generic name, but shout out the state of Massachusetts, Danvers, Mass. I don't know where the governor's academy is, but it sounds like he was a Northeast prep guy that went to Wake Forest. So we're going to talk about all these guys. My thought is, okay, what sent a bigger ripple through the baseball world? One name, Kyle Teal, or 15 names in the Rule 5 draft?
Yeah, Kyle Teal, I would
I
say for
think
sure.
so too, right? Like,
Yeah, and
I think it's
naturally
kind of no
we're going to
contest.
punt. Naturally, we're going to punt Kyle Teal out to the other side of the weekend, and we're going to talk about the other 15 names and the minor league phase. Some names in there that are some, I think, exciting and fun names. I mean, exciting is generous, but fun. Guys that, we were texting about like, oh, there goes Hyunil Choi. There goes Steve Hadger. So that side of it was fun. I thought you were going to ask what was the bigger ripple when Thad Ward was broken as the 1-1 pick early, or when Shane Smith, we had the breaking news of that being the 1-1 pick early this year. We're breaking the Rule 5 selection now. We had a year gap, but we're back to breaking the Rule 5 number one pick maybe an hour or two before the pick goes down.
Zero offense to Jonathan Mayo, but I think it was Passan that broke Thad Ward
Hmm.
two years ago. So I will tell you, Thad Ward had a bigger feel because it was Jeff Passan, and
Yeah.
there were a bunch of people that got the tweet notification and were like, "Who?
Who?
Like, do we care about this?" Versus Mayo, like obviously one of the leaders in the prospect industry has been, one of the front runners in the prospect world forever. Like, that he's tweeting something of relevance
Yeah.
in the prospect
You,
space.
you
But
know he's
Passan
in
is
it.
like, why are you dipping into this?
Yeah, I don't know. He must have just come across Passan's desk and he's like, you know what?
Snoops a
Whatever.
scoop.
I'll
Why not?
take it. I'll
Yeah.
take it. But we'll go through the order. I just
Yeah.
think pick by pick. Talk about the fits. Talk about why they were selected, especially if it was a player that we did not discuss in the preview.
Yep.
But I was a little bit surprised that Shane Smith was the first pick because I thought the White Sox could have went a lot of different routes, and Smith is a good arm, like no doubt about it. I'm interested to see how they use him because when he was with Biloxi, he was mostly working as a starter. But it was interesting. Start of the year, he was a reliever. Then middle of the year, he was a starter, and then end of the year, back to reliever. So I don't know if the goal was to manage innings. He was a reliever more so in 2023, but long reliever.
Hmm.
So I'm just very interested to see what the role is. Maybe that's exactly why the White Sox took him. That they don't want a guy that, they don't need an innings eater, so to speak. At the big league level, you might as well have Jonathan Cannon go do that, and might as well have some of your other guys that
Yeah.
have shown some things and before the top prospects come in and grab onto a rotation spot and hopefully never let go. But potentially here a guy that could be a valuable swingman, plug and play when you're trying to get by, but also could just end up settling into the bullpen and being a solid higher leverage guy because the fastball is really good. But I'm just very fascinated. Like this is one of those unique spots where I don't know how they're going to use him. And usually with the Rule 5, you have like a very clear, like, okay, they're going to fit him into this very specific role, or
Yeah.
this, or they just desperately needed innings. I think the White Sox, they must have just liked this arm here and felt like, hey, we like him. Let's just, we figure he's going to like hold on to a role one way or another. Let's see what it is.
He's been really good at the minor league level, man. A career 2.69 minor league ERA in 157 innings. And you mentioned he was a long reliever. He was a long reliever with a sub two in
Yeah.
2023. And he went from low A to double A for a brief cameo. And then this year, for the most part, was in Biloxi as that swing man, like you mentioned. And then, brief cameo in triple at the end of the year. And in 94 innings, this guy had a 3.05 ERA. So in his minor league career, it's 157 innings at a 2.69, but also 11 and a half strikeouts per nine, and the walks have not been an issue. So the production is there. The White Sox are in dire need of firefighters in that pitching staff. Like, they need somebody to come in when there is a 5-run second inning and get them to the seventh inning. And that's exactly what Shane Smith can do. There are going to be a lot of games like that. I saw
Yeah.
the text from our guy Peter Apple on the Just Baseball show that the White Sox over under win total is at 49 and a half next year. And like, I don't that is going to be a sweat. I think you see that number and you immediately think, "Oh, it's got to be over." Like, this offense is worse. This
Yeah.
offense is really really bad. I was thinking they were taking a bat just because they need warm bodies in that lineup, but it's kind of nice to have a firefighter here throwing in zero pressure. And if you feel like he needs another, couple months in the minor leagues, you make that happen in 2026. But I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to be the case. It feels like a more advanced arm than really anybody else taken.
No, and it's funky too. He's a cut ride guy, and I think it's just nice to add a guy like that to the fold, where it's like 10, 11 inches of vert, almost no horizontal or sometimes negative horizontal. So he's like really kind of getting that slight perception of that glove side cut, and he also turns inward just really late. Like it looks like everything's going to be pretty linear, and then very late you'll see his glove elbow almost start pointing towards like the direction of the hitter, and I think that really exaggerates that cut that when he kind of whips back around. So it's not a huge surprise to me that the fastball was dominant, and last year. Opponents had a 596 OPS against that fastball. So he had a 73% strike rate on it. 25% in zone whiff rate, chase rate at 29%. Like those are all great figures, and he commanded the fastball really well. So I think that really elevates the floor as a guy, like you said, that he could throw a lot of fastballs, and he did 60% usage last year. And with the variance there, sometimes it's going to be like just true riding. Other times it's going to have a little bit more of that cut. And if he can manipulate that, and like from what I've watched, seems like there's some intent to be able to manipulate that. That's almost like two pitches in one there. The question for him, and I think the reason why I do think he ultimately lands as a multi-inning reliever is he doesn't really have a secondary that he confidently commands and goes to. He has a curveball that he mixes in about 20% of the time. That pitch was fine. He has a cutter that'll mix in, which is a natural progression from a guy that has a cut ride fastball. That pitch is okay. And then a slider that he'll sprinkle in that actually I think flashes a little bit more at times. But, I think this is a guy that can really lean on the fastball and the variance movement wise and
Yeah.
just be able to be effective from there. And at the very least, I think they've got a middle reliever here and a guy that, as you mentioned, like if you want to send him back to the minors in 2026 and develop the arsenal a little bit further, you can, but you can't teach the fastball that he throws. It's very unique, and that's going to play, and that's going to get outs at the big league level, whether it's leverage or not. I have a good feeling about him being able to stick, not just because it's the White Sox, but because that fastball is so good.
Yeah, I'm with you. He could have stuck on 10 other teams, to be honest. Like, the 10 bottom dwellers in Major League Baseball in 2025. They could all use a guy like Shane Smith. And I feel like this is somehow safer than Thad Ward. And the Nats
Mm-hmm.
were hoping that Thad Ward would turn into that Swiss Army knife. I watched him throw in Rochester. It was really not good
Mm-hmm.
because he couldn't find the strike zone. But this guy you mentioned, unorthodox Turner,
Mm-hmm.
and the delivery looks a little weird, but he finds the strike zone all the time. He's also an unorthodox Turner at 6'4", 235. So
Yeah.
he's a bigger guy that like somehow manages to look a little funky. It's hard for bigger guys to look a little funky.
Yeah.
So everything about him kind of screams, okay, we'll figure it out. And I also think he can go through the progression of, yeah, he'll make a spot start. You might get lit up. But he learns that multi-inning relief role in 25, and then in 26, all of a sudden you've got Schultz, Thorpe, Cannon, Mason Adams, Grant Taylor. You've got all these guys that are going to factor in. Kai
Hagen
Bush,
Smith will be there, I
Street,
think.
Hagen Smith will be there. I mean, like you have all of these starting pitching options. You might as well find a guy that can be a tweener
Yeah.
here at the big league
And
level.
just stockpile, man. Like
Yeah.
it's just, I think that was a big problem that they had. The last time that they did this rebuild thing is, I think there was a lot of focus on the stars and the bats, and I don't think
Yeah.
there was enough focus on pitching depth and layers of talent. And I think that's the difference here. One note on Thad Ward, and that's the reason why I think the Rule 5 approach is even changed since then a little bit more, is you need somebody that's weird and excels. We talked about it, kind of like one thing, something specific. Thad Ward was a kitchen sink guy with fringy command.
Yeah.
So that's not going to translate nearly as well. Generally speaking, we have the benefit of hindsight. He was clearly the most accomplished arm that was not protected. But
Yeah.
now in hindsight, we were able to see maybe why the Red Sox didn't want to protect him. And you can say, we've said plenty of things about Chaim Bloom. The one thing that you can't say about Chaim Bloom is that he doesn't have a good feel for his farm system
He
and
knows his
and
farms.
scouting. So
I'm
yeah,
I'm I'm buying low on the Cardinals right now because I think Chaim Bloom is going to put them in a position to succeed from the farm up. And I was hoping that they would be, the type of organization that spends to stay relevant, but they have the right guy in charge if they want to take this
if they
avenue.
don't want to do that. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of spending, the number 2 pick,
Hmm.
the Marlins. They're a team that has not spent a dollar so far this free agency this offseason. Well, technically, I mean, some minor league deals. I think you could count that, right? I'm sure Ronnie Simon's getting 20, 30 G's a month, maybe. So, breaking out the pocketbook there. But they take Liam Hicks from the Tigers. So Liam Hicks was traded from the Rangers to Detroit in that Carson Kelly deal. And Hicks is a guy that we actually got to see in the Arizona Fall League a year ago. He tore it up there. The feel to hit is what stands out. And I remember we were talking about him when he was in the Arizona Fall League. He's like, whoa, I never really realized how good this guy's contact rates were. He's run a zone contact rate around 90% over the last couple seasons. The defense has come along a little bit, but that's been a big part of it too, is like how much value are you going to get there behind the dish? I think it's gotten better to the point where you can say he's good enough behind there. And then the other thing is the power, right? Like there's not going to be a ton there, but it's a unique profile, which we've talked about in the past, where it's the fact that you're getting a plus contact rates from the left side as a catcher is pretty unique. The Marlins were apparently dangling him though right after that. There was talks about a trade that was close with the Rays. Ultimately, that didn't happen. So the Marlins keep him. I think it's a great fit for a lot of reasons, but I mean the Marlins have Nick Fortes right now at the big league level, and you understand the value of him as just like a guy that handles the staff well, fine defender, but it's really a backup guy in general. Obviously, the Marlins have Agustin Ramirez on the way, but he still has some defensive, I think, progress that needs to be made. So in the meantime, I think Hicks is a great catcher just to be able to add to the fold in a contact-oriented left-handed bat that should end up probably grabbing ABs even when he's not catching at times.
Yeah, he feels like a total time buyer. I'm with you. And by the way, I mean, cheap shot at the Miami Marlins. They're spending $0 in free agency to this point because I want to throw out the other organizations that haven't spent a buck yet. Um, KC extended Waka, so you can count that, but they've spent zero in free agency. Minnesota, Milwaukee, Houston, San Diego, Washington, St. Louis, Arizona, all have not spent a single dollar in free agency yet. Give him time.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
yeah.
Uh, he is a good time buyer for Augustine Ramirez. And worst comes to worst, you lose out on what, $50,000 and you return Hicks when Augustine Ramirez is ready.
Well, and I think honestly, you could probably dump him somewhere else. There's just you see all these trades for catchers all the time, where it's like even if it's a third or fourth string catcher, you can go find a team that wants some depth real quick, and they'll give you some depth arm in exchange. Right? I think of like Evan McKendry for Alex Jackson, like
Yeah.
classic trade like that. So I don't think it'll be hard to move off if you need to. But the things that stand out to me with Hicks is 91% in zone contact rate last year and a 15% chase rate. Like that, offensively speaking, that's going to work. I can't speak to how good the receiving is. I can't say I've delved into that too much. But in terms of catch and throw, got a lot better last year as well. And like again, if he's an average or even close to it defender, I think the bat will translate enough to where he can carry his weight, and I think that's all you really want. We're talking about a Rule 5 catcher here, and a guy that we're talking about a Marlins offense that is probably going to K a decent amount. Doesn't have a ton of pure hitters outside of Xavier Edwards, maybe one or two others if you really squint. But I think Liam Hicks is another guy that's going to be able to put the ball in play pretty consistently. He walks more than he he walks more than he K'd last year. So the EVs are low, but he hits the ball in the air consistently. I think this is a guy that could actually make the leap serviceably. And who knows, like could end up just being a bat that they carry, and the Marlins may end up just being comfortable going three catchers because Ramirez can play a little first, he can DH. Fortes is that true backup catcher, and then Hicks is a guy that also could be just a solid bat off the bench, given the way he grinds out ABs, puts ball in play, and things like that. So I think if you're the Marlins, aside from the fact that he's a catcher, you're just have to be happy to be bringing in a bat that has these peripherals of
Yep.
90+% in zone contact and a 15% chase rate. Marlins don't have a lot of guys like that.
Right. And the only thing missing in the pie is what 90th percentile EV being above average, and that's slightly below.
It's comfortably below.
Okay.
And that's the biggest thing. Like the power might be like well below average, and that's going to be the biggest limiter, and that's why he was available. There has to be a flaw, right? Like
Right.
so
Yeah.
hard
You
hit
need to
rate
make
of 24% last year. So like that's
okay.
not great.
You need to make sure that you are essentially trying to grab the 1201st best player in
Yeah.
baseball because you've got 30 organizations, 40 spots on their 40-man roster. Like I understand why, he's outside the top 1200, but you want to shoot as close to 1201 as you possibly can, and
Yeah.
it feels like this is one of those guys.
And if you're taking a left-handed catcher, it's even harder sometimes. I think a guy could be 14-20, and he's still
Yeah.
going to be protected because he's a left-handed hitting catcher. So, yeah, I think from that lens, he's going to get opportunity, and it makes sense that the Marlins would want to pick him up.
Yeah.
Number 3 in the draft, the Angels took Garrett McDaniels from the Dodgers organization. Left-handed pitcher. Did not have much on him. We did not preview him. I don't think he was a guy that we had circled out of that system. But as we talked about, like this is what happens. Dodgers prospects, Yankees prospects sometimes, like Rays prospects get plucked, and it's not even the ones that you thought would get plucked. When I delved into it a little bit further last night, I was able to kind of figure out why the Angels very quickly would want to just grab him. He's a funky lefty with a disgusting slider. And we'll see how everything else comes along. Like the fastball is not great, and the command of the fastball is not great, but the command of the slider is good. He kept the walk rate below 10% last season. It's really about that slider though. From his release point, it is tough to hit. Opponents hit about like 140 against it last year.
Damn. The numbers on Garrett McDaniels in the Dodgers system last year, 73 innings, a 3.19 ERA. And it seems like he's had previous command issues that he held in check this year. He also like really hasn't thrown at
Yeah.
the professional ranks. Like before 2024, this guy threw 1 inning in 22 and threw 18 innings in 23. So it feels like this more than really any other was banking on the pitch shapes, and it's like, hey, this is going to work. We're going to figure this out.
Yeah, and he, I mean, and the funk from the left side. He comes set. He comes set totally closed, where the front foot is about like a foot or two towards first base, and then it's a high leg kick. He totally turns. It's a long arm swing, and the glove flies at you first, and the arm comes at you after. And when the slider comes from that release point, it just looks like a nightmare, especially left on left. And I think what the Angels feel like they got here is at least a guy that is going to be able to be a lefty specialist. Lefties hit 161 against him this past season with a 565 OPS. So that is where talk about a role, very specific role. You may not want to put him out there against righties too much, but he handled righties fine too, and was able to limit damage there against righties because that fastball is a heavier sinker. It works better against righties than lefties. Lefties seem to hit it a little bit better at times, but he can get contact on the ground. But that slider should just allow him to get lefties out, and maybe that's the role that they just want him for. So it makes sense from that lens.
So when you were describing the delivery, all I heard was hater, and I went to the portal to watch video, and it's a little bit more like I guess crochet, but a longer arm swing. Like crochet
It's
almost
a
has
long
that.
arm swing. Yeah.
Yeah, like crochet almost has that quarterback hold the ball to his ear thing and then fire straight down at you. But like everything with crochet is working right towards the plate. It feels like everything's working right towards the plate except his throwing arm, and that
Yeah.
arm path is long. So it's unorthodox for sure. And like there's not another look that looks similar to it, at least
No.
among established big leaguers.
100%. And I think when you look at the fourth pick from the Athletics, Noah Murdock, who
Hmm.
they plucked away from the Royals, that's another funky look. Murdock is 6'6", but he somehow looks tall, or 6'8", excuse me. I was gonna say he's 6'8". That already is a ridiculous look because it's a sinker from that 6'8" frame that is 96 miles per hour, a slider off of that, and a cutter as well. Shocker, this 6'8" pitcher struggles with command, but apparently the Athletics feel like he is worth a roll of the dice. I know a lot of teams were in on Murdock. Like he was circled by a lot of ball clubs as a guy that I think was attracting plenty of interest. And I think the way that he finished the year from a strikeout perspective and things like that only helped his case. But yeah, you're getting a 6'8" pitcher with a heavy sinker and a good slider. It's worth a shot.
He looks like Sean Jelly. Like Jelly's 6'11", but he looks 7'4". Murdoch is 6'8", but he looks 6'11". Like it's a little crazy to watch, and like the hand separation is just so intense. Like there's just a lot happening there. And I understand why he'd be having command issues because there's a lot happening with his upper body, and that's got to be really, really hard to time up with your lower half if you're that big.
Yeah, I don't know if like, just looking at the video and everything, watching him just pitch. It
There's not
seems
much like
like
comp.
it's gonna be hard
Yeah.
to make that work at the big league level, especially considering he hasn't really consistently made it work at the lower levels. Clearly, the A's have a little bit of an affinity for these taller arms, and they're willing to be tolerant in lower cost acquisitions, whether it be a trade, a smaller trade. Like I'm thinking about going to get a Joe Boyle. Like they're willing to take a shot and see how it goes, and I don't blame them for doing that. But I'm with you. Like it feels like his body goes, then the arm is like catching up behind it, and it just seems very difficult to sync up and everything. But you can dream on what it could look like if he is able to put it all together. And there was one appearance against St. Paul that I think his biggest supporters that probably wanted him to be selected in the A system were probably circling, where he goes 3 innings and punches out 6. So you saw him stretched out a little bit more too. But the other side of things that I think probably helped his case is that or up until July 1st, he averaged 95.6 miles per hour with his fastball. And then when you go through the last month, he ticked up to like 96.5. So a guy that was handling the workload, and if anything, throwing harder and harder as the year went on. It's a high risk, high reward compared to some of these other arms, but I would say probably the riskiest arm taken in the Rule 5.
Probably just because there's a chance that he doesn't throw any strikes and you
Yes.
return it. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think Sacramento's okay with that, or the
Yeah.
A's are okay with taking that, especially if they were going to offer Max Fried $400 million. What was the report?
Yeah, I think they came out
Yeah,
and got
yeah.
nixed.
Force David Force said, "No, that's not true.
Yeah,
We were not in on that."
I mean, ridiculous, ridiculous. But that you're seeing all of a sudden, John Fisher wants to invest in the product. Great timing with.
Why not?
Yeah, he's trying to prove something to the Vegas officials now, and never tried to prove anything to Oakland. So,
Turn Sutter Health Park into the Loud House. Turn it into
yeah,
one of the toughest environments in baseball.
yeah, the picture of Luis Severino, just
Dude.
at the ballpark, just looking like, oh my gosh,
He
what did
knew
I
what he was
do?
signing up for.
Yeah,
He
he knew,
had to know.
he knew. Maybe they'll try. I don't know what they're gonna do, but that's for another time. Number 5, I think this arguably the safest pick in this Rule 5 draft. Evan Reifert from the Rays goes to the Nationals. How about the Nationals, man? They get the number 1 pick. We got to talk about the draft lottery too. That we talked about that on the Just Baseball show. We'll talk about that next week as well. Pretty wild results. But
Yeah.
if you're a Nationals fan, you got to be excited. They're reportedly active in free agency. They have the core that we've talked about, and that is well documented at this point. And yeah, to get the number one pick coming up is awesome. But Reifert's a guy that, I mean, if a fan was following the Rule 5, I think this is probably one of the more like commonly brought up names because of how good the numbers have been throughout his professional career, but also the fact that his slider is just ridiculously disgusting. And we've talked about that. Like the numbers on the slider since the start of the 2022 season are nuts. But this is a guy that, I think will be able to get big league outs right away. We'll see it. It's just going to be a question of how high of leverage, and that's going to be mostly predicated on the command.
Yeah.
But this is a big league slider, and that's putting it lightly. This is a 70 grade big league slider.
Yeah, 35 appearances, a 1.96 ERA in 41 and a third. He allowed 22 hits. What's the batting average against on that? Like overall, I'm not just talking the slider. I'm talking like 41 and a third. He faced 161 hitters, allowed 22 hits.
Yeah. Well, I got one playoff appearance here. So you said how many batters?
161.
Okay. Got a couple playoff appearances here. And hold on. There we go. 155 batting average.
There you go. So a 1.96 ERA, a 155 batting average against, a whip under one, and in 41 of the third, 65 Ks to 16 walks. So he was clearly landing it this year, and you're betting on landing it. Here's another take for you. And that signed Christian Walker. Like I do think that they are trending in a way that like they're ready to start competing very, very soon.
Yep.
And you have this outfield of Wood, Cruz, and Jacob Young. You've got Abrams at short. You have Luis Garcia at second base, who I think is pretty solid.
Yeah.
You add a vet in Walker, and then you piece together everything else. Gore looks like I think a frontline starter when he's got it going. And then you add Reifert to the fold. You spend elsewhere, and then you add Ethan Holiday possibly, and it becomes that Beltway series of Jackson and Ethan in
Yep.
Baltimore and DC. Holy hell! Like the Nats buy stock now.
Yeah, and then you just the found money of these back end arms at least of like a Mitchell Parker who can hold on to a rotation spot,
Yeah, DJ Hers.
and Jake Irvin looked like he could be solid. So like you want a little bit more impact in the rotation, and they might be able to go spend and do that, or they'll wait it out another year. But regardless, I think you feel pretty good about that. You see what you can hopefully get from a Cade Cavalli. That would be nice. And go from there. But that number one pick also gives them the opportunity to take a Jamie Arnold and then save money. Now you have the top arm in the draft, and now you can get a stud with the second pick. So they're in a really cool spot.
You can't miss out on the Holiday thing with Baltimore and DC. Like
MLB's going to
honestly,
mandate it, huh?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They rigged that thing.
Yeah. Reifert, I mentioned this stat, I think, when we did the preview. Since the start of the 2022 season, opponents against Evan Reifert's slider, which he throws 50% of the time,
Yeah.
are 14 for 183 with 137 strikeouts.
Yeah.
That's an 077 batting average with as a 67% strikeout rate and a 51% in zone whiff rate, a 42% chase rate, and a 31% swinging strike rate. We talked about it. Who has the only home run in that span off of Evan Reifert's slider?
My guy with the red eye black,
Austin Hendrick.
baby.
Austin Hendrick.
Not bad for a 30th round pick in 2018 at a North Iowa area community college.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was the school.
Baseball again. Baseball's the closest thing we have to a meritocracy. Like
They'll find
come
you.
from that. You find one pitch, you're going to be a big leaguer in some form or fashion.
Helps that he throws 94 now, but that's standard, right? Like that is kind of standard.
Big
So
league
it's
average.
yeah, the slider is what got him there, and it's what's going to, I think, get him into the big leagues consistently with success.
Yep.
Sixth pick, another guy that we did not preview, Angel Bastardo goes to the Blue Jays, was formerly with the Red Sox. I think we saw a lot of like interdivision snatching away here and there. Like, and I think you see that kind of every year. There's maybe a little bit more familiarity sometimes with that, but Bastardo going from the Red Sox org to the Blue Jays, right-handed pitcher. Again, didn't have a ton on him before, but this is a guy that's younger and has shown some great flashes. So you'll get into the numbers, but the fastball was up velocity-wise, and then he was hurt, and we didn't see him throw since June 5th. But clearly, I think the Blue Jays felt like he's going to be good to go at some point, and they can wait if they need to, whatever it may be. But prior to that, he had struck out 10 in an outing, then 8 in an outing, then 4, then 8, and then went down in that final appearance. So there's definitely some upside here from a 6'1", 175-pound righty who's still just 22 years old.
Yeah, Bastardo, 45 and a third innings at a 5.36 ERA. Before that, 119 innings last year between high A and double A to 4.68. So it's not like the run prevention's been that good for him at the minor league level. He's got a career 4.76 ERA.
Yeah.
You really don't see guys taken like that unless there's something that jumps out and there's lack of availability like in Alex Santos in Houston. We've talked about him. Like the minor league numbers are not that good, but pitch shape could indicate that it can work if you put him in the right role. With this guy, like, he's essentially an innings eater. He's a true starting pitcher. I don't know if the Jays are going to change that. I assume they would, but the numbers haven't been good, like
Yeah.
really anywhere. His best year is a 3.7 and 51 innings in the DSL in 2019.
Yeah, that is wild. Um, I will say it is the pitch shape side of things for sure.
Yeah,
This guy's getting like run and ride. I mean, he's getting like 17, 18 inches of vert from a standard release height. So that's going to be above average. But then a lot of his fastballs are getting 13, 14 inches of horizontal as well. I think he could almost benefit by killing some of that run and it really accentuating the ride. A lot of the best best fastballs that I saw him throw were fastballs that had less horizontal. The run and ride is good to have at points, but I think you want to have some of that true ride working as well, especially when you consider the fact that he has his best pitch is a changeup. And I think the changeup is really also what endeared him to the Blue Jays. That
hmm
changeup had some pretty gaudy whiff numbers. Threw it 30% of the time, landed it for a strike 68% of the time before going down this year, and 37% in zone whiff rate, 43% chase rate. So, like, those are the numbers. So, I think they're looking at a fastball with good characteristics and a nasty changeup, and they figure there's a guy that can, find a way to get big league outs. He also mixes in a pretty good curveball. Like, the arsenal is a lot better than the results, but at a certain point, you want to see the results.
yeah.
But that might be an opportunity to grab a player here whose stuff is probably a lot better than some of the other guys that have had results, but may not be conducive to big league success as much, like a Thad Ward, as we talked about.
Right. And I was, honestly kind of surprised that like we didn't see a Ryan Webb go. But it's clear what, some teams prefer. Like they prefer the pitch shapes that I feel like are, doable at the big league level versus a guy that has been really good in the minor leagues results wise and like is very good at the run prevention thing and base runner prevention thing, but the pitches may not profile at their best at the major league level.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's why, I mean, I was surprised too for that same reason. But I think, teams feel like, okay, well, if he's not turning over the lineup twice, the hell do we do with a guy like Ryan Webb? So I get it from that perspective, but I would still have been happy to take him if I'm a team that had an open spot. And I think there's a lot of teams that could have used a player like Ryan Webb.
Yeah, I think, it comes down to where we're at in baseball in 2025, to be honest, and not like wax poetic, but it's like you're gonna I think I think teams are accounting for much more human error than they should on the mound. Like I
Yeah.
think that they're saying, oh, this guy's going to get out of whack in some form or fashion. So what's going to survive when a guy's working at his 60th percentile? When like I understand we're 8 years removed from Kyle Hendricks winning an ERA title, but I do think that those guys can still kind of survive.
Hmm.
Like I think that there are executors in Major League Baseball, and I think the guys that are winning Cy Young awards, yeah, they have stuff, but like they're executing at the best level that you've ever seen. I think we've gotten too far away from trusting pitchers to do what they've been taught to do.
We talked about it in the hitting side too. We're seeing a lot of the throwback hitters start to make their way back and be more relevant again too. And I think we're going to see that with pitching as well. And the comp I used is obviously a lighter version of it, but like there was Ryan Webb similarities with Braxton Garrett. And Braxton Garrett's
Yeah.
a guy that nobody was, including myself, giving much credit to when he was first coming up. Like I know he was a first round pick, but the stuff was subdued. Like, is he going to consistently get outs? Everyone kept saying, "Oh, he's going to hit a wall. He's going to hit a wall. He's going to hit a wall." I know he was hurt last year, but he never hit a wall in terms of being able to get outs. Every time he's been on the mound for the last couple of years, he's been good at 90 miles per hour from the left side. Maybe he'll grab a three here and there. So there's guys that can make it work. And I think Webb will get a shot sooner rather than later, regardless. Um,
Yeah.
Take a bow on Cooper Bowman. You called the shot here. Uh, the A's lose their probably like 20th or top 25 prospect. When we did the system, he wasn't in the top 15, but he wasn't far out of it.
Right.
He goes to the Reds. And It's interesting. If you told me Cooper Bowman got selected, the Reds would have been like the 20th team I would have guessed had selected him given their situation. But I guess like any team that is looking at their bench, and that's where Bowman's going to go as a utility guy, uh, you know, could use a Cooper Bowman. And if they want to allocate money elsewhere and they wanted a bench player, like great, you've got a bench player now for the minimum that can play all freaking over. I think why they went for a Cooper Bowman here is that they probably want a right-handed hitter that can spell the lefties in the outfield as well. Like I think
Yeah.
Bowman is going to be playing a little bit more outfield here than infield, and that's at least how I came away from it because like they don't need another infielder, so to speak. Of course, it's great to have a guy that can do that, but it's a
Yeah.
nice complementary like and kind of backup plan if Stu Fairchild isn't really going to be the guy for you. If you don't want to roll with Stu Fairchild as the right-handed side of things in the outfield, because remember it's Fraley, it's Friedel, it's Will Benson out there as well. Like
Yeah.
it's really interesting in terms of how lefty heavy they are out there. They might, have Steer out there in left field, but again, could be an opportunity to plug in a more athletic guy when you need to, late game substitution, things like that. Bowman played a lot of center field and Bowman crushes lefties. And I think that was the biggest thing. When we did playing GM for the Reds, that I was like, they need a lefty masher. Like they just, and that's why I loved Randall Grichuk. This
Yeah.
is why I think Bowman's actually a great fit. This past season against lefties, I know you get into the overall stats, but 316, 415, 513 slash line. That's a 928 OPS against left-handed pitching with an 18% chase rate. I think that translates. So you now have a speedster who can spell lefties and play infield or outfield. I, I like the fit the more I think about it.
Yeah, 770 OPS overall, 844 in Double A, and then he got to Triple A for 38 games, and he was really bad, like
Yeah,
a
he was not good.
592 OPS. But that's okay, because you have a short end of the platoon guy that adds to the speed identity that they have. Like Cincinnati ran with the best of them in Major League Baseball. If I'm not mistaken, I think they led Major League Baseball in stolen bases last year, and you add 43 stolen bases from the minor league level to this big league roster. When I saw this pick, my knee jerk reaction was, what makes Cooper Bowman better than Tyler Callahan? And the answer is for them, the handedness. Callahan's a
Hmm.
lefty bat, Bowman's a righty bat. So that does feel like a platoon advantage for Cincinnati and advantage Bowman over Tyler Callahan for the Red situation. They added Callahan to the 40. I thought if they were going to take somebody in the Rule 5 draft, it wouldn't have been somebody that essentially does the same thing that Tyler Callahan does, but here we are.
Yeah, and I think the ability to play center too, right? Because Friedel is going to be your center fielder. Gets
Yeah,
hurt a
and
lot.
and Callahan played a bunch of left. Like
Yeah,
he never played center. He hasn't played
exactly.
center.
Exactly. So that's what I think a big separator is. You want to keep Friedel healthy, and you don't really want him facing lefties too much. Another reason why I think that works. One thing worth noting too, though, is I think Bowman struggles in AAA. A big part of that may have been because of the fact that he was playing second base all year in AA, and the second he gets to AAA, full time center field, like not playing any second base, like full time center field. At the end of the year, he's playing a long season, might have caught up to him a little bit, might have also just been worried about just getting acclimated to center field and everything. So that's a lot for a guy to take on. So we'll see how now with more time to continue to work out there and everything, how that works for him and everything. But I do think this is a good fit for them and kind of a more versatile option to what they were hoping Blake Dunn would be,
Yeah.
and a guy that can now play in the infield and do a little bit more, I think, for them. So also, if McLean is still a little banged up and you want to give him some days off, like there's a lot of wrinkles to this where he can fill and answer a lot of their questions. So I liked that Bowman pick.
Yeah.
The Rays took Nathan Lavender from the Mets with the eighth pick. I don't have a ton on him either. We're like pulling up some of the notes here, but Lavender, a guy that we thought the Rays could go kind of like any which way. I didn't think they'd go for the soft tossing lefty who hadn't thrown since May or April 19th,
Yeah.
but that's what they did.
That is what they did. 5 appearances this year with Syracuse, 7 innings, 9 Ks, 7 walks. Go back to 2023 between double and triple. 42 appearances at a 2.98 ERA, K'd 14 and a half per nine, walked 4.5. So there's clearly something good there, but
He's very
we're
weird.
a year removed from a very something good. I'm not going to doubt the Rays because the Rays know way more than I do.
Yes.
But this was definitely the one that made me say like, who?
Yeah. Yeah. No, me too. But he's weird. Shocker. Like works way down on the mound. Like chest is like facing the ground completely. Arm is like coming behind him and rips the fastball and the slider from there. It's like a 5-3 release height, and then he gets some run and ride from that. So you get the weird release from the left side, and the Rays are gonna say, sign me up. So they're gonna put him in the bullpen. He gets like 7 feet of extension because of the way that he works down on the mound. So I think they feel like they can maybe teach him a little bit of something different with the slider, maybe tweak a few things here or there, and make it work. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at some before he got hurt. I'm looking at some of the pitches he threw. He threw a fastball. It is an individual pitch, but like still, like I think on average, 7.5 feet of extension from a 5-2 release height. That's why he was selected, Jack.
Yeah, so he's just trying to get as close to home plate as
He's
he
trying to
possibly
hand it to
can.
the catcher.
He's doing the was it Carter caps that would jump forward?
Yeah,
Um,
Carter Caps.
I mean, dude, they clearly found it with McClanahan. McClanahan's 100 at what, 7 feet of extension or
Yeah.
7.2 or something like that. So they like guys that jump at the hitter. So yeah, there you go, 7.5 feet of
Oh,
extension. You're
dude,
welcome.
dude. He's doing the Nestor Cortez too, like hanging around. Oh, they
So so you know who else does that? Another guy who was susceptible to the Rule 5 for the second year in a row, Tanner Burns with Cleveland. He's doing the Nestor thing too. And like I guess it works because it's still 95, but when you're not Nestor, I just feel like that's kind of eyewash. But you know what? Good on him.
You know what? I think if you're weird though, in a different way, you can do it. Like if you throw 90 and you get 7.5 feet of extension from a 5-3, just lean into it and be a weirdo. So I'm here for it. I'm with you though. If you're like a Tanner Burns is not as much of the guy that I think should be like doing the Nestor thing, but some of these individual fastballs, and I think it's about finding the consistency. I'm looking at a fastball right now that he threw at 92 miles per hour. 15.5 inches of vert from a 5-3 release height with 7.5 feet of extension. I can guarantee you not one fastball was thrown like that this year in the major leagues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why he was taken. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what that looks like and if the Rays can make that thing work. But I think clearly some unique aspects there. Ninth pick, Twins. I love it. They take Eiberson Castellano from the Phillies. We talked about him in the preview as one of, I think, the most impressive arms, just period.
Yeah.
23 years old, can fill different roles because the curveball is plus, the fastball is mid 90s, and he has a pair of them. He's got a four seamer and a sinker, and he mixes in a changeup as well. 6'3, 230 pounds. He had stretches. I mean, he struck out 10 or more in four different starts this year. Struck out as many as 13 in an appearance. Finished the year pretty strong aside from one blow up in double A. I think this is a really fun arm. I'd imagine they put him in the bullpen, but also just good insurance in case one of your arms goes down. I know the Twins are still trying to figure out the rotation. They don't want to spend money, as you alluded to earlier. I think Castellano is just a great arm to add who can be a swingman for them with loud stuff and still relatively young at 23.
Yeah, but their $0 of spending is somehow better than the Marlins $0 of spending, right? That's what you were
Yes,
insinuating.
because they have a shortstop that's worth more than $100 million, and their payroll is not already at the bottom of the league.
I didn't know Brooks Lee was worth $100 million. They have a bunch of fours, and Pablo, Joe Ryan are going to lead it. Bailey Ober was good last year, but Bailey Ober I consider a four. I consider a high end four, but he's a four.
Wrong.
Okay, he's a two. Simeon Woods Richardson, I consider a four.
Yes.
Chris Paddock, I consider a four. Then you've
Yeah.
got Castellano here. Zebby Matthews, don't forget about him. I
I
consider him
consider
a
a
four
four.
in 2025. David Festa, I consider him a four.
He
Like
could be better though.
he
He
could be
could be.
better, but in
I currently
2025,
consider
I
him a four.
consider
I
him a
agree.
four.
Yes.
Like there are a whole bunch of people like that.
Might as
So
well have
might as
20
well,
of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
just add another in
Yeah.
Castellano.
I mean, if you're not going to have a frontline guy, you might as well have as many irons in the fire as you can
And
at a
they've got
four.
two frontline guys, I think, in Pablo and Joe Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. It's the availability thing, and like, I think if you're not gonna add another like Yeah, I should probably rephrase it. If you're not going to add another like clear cut three or better,
Yeah.
fill out the rest of your rotation with a bunch of four options and a
Yep.
bunch of 4 or 5 options, and that's exactly what they've done. And then I think the injury stuff is worth like wanting to have somebody that can be stretched out when needed
Yep.
because of, Pablo has had a history of not always sprinting through the tape. You've had, Joe Ryan this past year deal with some injuries, Chris Paddock deal with injuries. Like there's a lot of guys. Festa in the past, has had his innings managed. So, I like the idea of having a guy that can be stretched out rather than just going for a bullpen arm when their bullpen is pretty good.
Yep.
They seem to have plenty of arms in that regard.
Yep.
I think in terms of highest regarded prospect, he's up there with just about anybody that was selected as well. Well, we got one more coming.
I think so.
10th pick, Gage Workman goes to the Cubs, taken away from the Tigers. Workman, this is another utility bat, guy that could play plug in at short when needed, plug in at third, second, first, whatever you may need. I think Gage Workman ended up being selected off of how well he finished the year. And it was a great year for him overall statistically.
Yeah.
But I think, like, talk about through the tape, sprinted through the tape
Yeah.
this year. Final 50 games of the season, 320, 391, 565 slash run. That's a 956 OPS with 11 home runs. He strikes out a fair amount, but you're not going to put him up against lefties. So you can cut that down a little bit. Against righties this past season, strikeout rate was 25.5%. So
It's okay.
he's not going to face lefties. He's a bench bat. He hits the ball pretty hard. He's athletic. He can move all over. Seems like a fun, kind of Brad Miller light potentially type of utility piece.
One of my favorite people in baseball. I love
Really?
Gage Workman, 2018 Brewster Whitecap. He is the man. And he was out there a year before he should have been, man. He was, 18 years old or 17 years old when he was out there. He got to Arizona State early. So this was the Ryan Williams thing at Alabama, but it was college baseball at Arizona State. He was beyond his years maturity wise, and I'm sure he's going to handle this. It's also, he stopped switch hitting going into 2024. He was a switch hitter, and that probably, hindered his offensive development. So he just decided, you know what, going to be a lefty full time. Let's do this. And I think it's a really good option. I was looking at this pick and I said, why is he a better option than Luis Vasquez? The answer is Dansby's right-handed at the plate. Dansby's a right-handed hitter. Nico Horner's a right-handed hitter. Isaac Paredes is a right-handed hitter. Seiya Suzuki is a right-handed hitter. Luis Vasquez is a right-handed hitter. You have a whole bunch of righties. You needed a lefty option in the infield that can back these guys up, and it's either him or Miles Masterboni. And I'm going to go with Gage Workman 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I'm gonna roll the dice on the 6'4", 200-pound, utility guy who moves way better than anybody should that's that big and clearly has strong numbers against righties. There's again the swing and miss concerns there. He borders on aggressive at times, but the way that he finished the year as a guy that, as you mentioned, like Nick's a switch hitting recently. And I mean, if you cut the sample shorter and shorter, final 40 games of the season, 1,028 OPS,
Yeah.
333, 406, 623 slash line. Clearly things were working for him. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, worth a flyer if you're looking for a bench bat.
Yep.
The Braves, again, we got intra-division, snatch here. Take Anderson Pilar from the Marlins, right-handed pitcher. This was one of those that we didn't really have much on. We don't think we talked about much. He's 26 years old. But then you look at the underlying stuff and can make some sense. How did the overall season numbers look?
Overall season numbers 58 innings at a 2.64 ERA, 11 Ks per nine, 2 walks per nine.
Yeah. I
So they
mean,
look good. I will tell you, this could have been a very, very late push. And I'm not talking affiliated baseball. In the Dominican Winter League with Gigantes, 21 innings, 27 Ks, 2 walks. They could be
yeah.
sold on what's happening down in the DR.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's why a lot of these guys go out and play out there, right? It's an opportunity to further endear themselves. And I mean, he also carried that momentum from the end of the season. Last appearance of the year, which I think is really interesting. His last regular season appearance before going out and doing what he's doing in the Winter League was against Gwinnett. So
There
the
you go.
Braves AAA affiliate, he goes 3 innings shutout, no walks, 5 Ks. So
That's everything you got to know.
26 years old, fastball sits around 93, great characteristics, good ride through the zone, good in zone whiff rate. Slider is I think a borderline plus pitch, and he mixes in an above average changeup, at least average. He doesn't like to throw it a ton, but it can be a decent pitch. So I think this is another relief piece. I'm also not going to doubt the Braves' ability to pluck relief arms either.
No. Um, this guy was signed by the Rockies 2016 through 2023 with the Rockies. Didn't clear high A. From 16 to 23, didn't clear high A. He threw 25 innings with Spokane in 2023. And then in 24, he climbs from Beloit to Jacksonville with the Marlins, and now he's a Brave.
And that's the thing. There's so many talented arms, and there's so many little things that you can find now that like guys can just turn their career around at the snap of a finger. Which that undersells how hard it is, the work. But in terms of just one year, you could be stuck. The next year, you can be Rule 5'd and set to be on a big league roster. And that's what makes baseball so damn cool.
Yep.
We're going to talk about arguably the best prospect taken in the Rule 5, and then three more picks after that. But before that, quick break. All right, the Padres plucked a good one. Juan Nunez, right-hander from the Orioles.
Yep.
MLB Pipeline had Juan Nunez as Baltimore's number 8 prospect.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He's a good arm. This is another guy that, I know you add him to the bullpen of just high octane stuff in that Padres, pen. I think he balances it out though, because Nunez is a guy that, they were using as a starter in high Aberdeen and is making as big of a leap as anybody, right? Like he didn't throw after May 14th in high A, but I think the Orioles were okay rolling the dice considering the fact that he hadn't thrown since May 14th in high A, is 24 years old, but the numbers were really good before he went down. And this is a guy that, I think you put him in the bullpen in shorter spurts, stuff ticks up, but he's a dude that located 4 pitches for a strike. So he could be that swing man. This is an arm that I think you can stash. We talk about being able to stash. Like you're going to put him in spots. Obviously, he's not going to never throw, but you're going to put him in more of those mop up spots, and then I think continue to develop him because he's a late bloomer at 24, but
Yeah.
clearly has something going for him with 4 pitches. Like this is a guy that I'd be willing to be patient with and have him a mop up duty and just continue to see how he can develop, assuming he stays healthy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, San Diego is cutting their, I guess, bullpen short, but like it feels like every bullpen has a guy like this anyways. So might as well make somebody with legitimate prospect intrigue like that. And San Diego has no problem building a super pen elsewhere. Like if you have to take just one body away from them, they're going to be fine. It's like, hey, go do it again, Yuki Matsui. Go do it again, Brian Hoeing.
And
Like
it's one
you're
long
good.
relief guy, right? Like that's a role that a lot of bullpens have
Yeah,
anyways.
exactly. Like I think all, 30 organizations have somebody that they can view as like, hey, we're up 8, we're down 8. Like just go eat this and he can be that guy to eat it. And I like that it's a prospect instead of, 29-year-old that's been around and it's like, okay, we're going to see an 89-mile-an-hour fastball for the next, 3 innings.
And they're betting on whatever clicked for Nunez before he got hurt continuing to happen because it was a 13% walk rate in 2023. 2024, he cuts that before going down to 8.5%, but it's a strike rate across the entire arsenal, right? The fastball, then getting a 65% strike rate, the slider at 66, a cutter at 69, and then a changeup at 75. And the changeup is what he really found, and I think was a big difference maker for him this year as well. Just destroyed hitters when he was able to throw. He threw 68 changeups this year, 51 of them for a strike, and a chase rate north of 50%. So that's a pitch that he introduces more, I assume. This is a very fascinating arm. In terms of prospect intrigue, I think him and Eiberson Castellanos are the 2 clear-cut, most projectable prospects taken.
Yeah.
13, a guy that I know you've seen plenty of. Connor Thomas goes to the Brewers from the Cardinals. And Thomas fits the bill of the innings eater, right? He's like 5'11", sinker baller, gets a lot of ground balls. He turned in another good year. They moved him to this kind of Swiss Army knife role. It's 89 to 91, but at the same time, like he keeps putting up pretty decent numbers.
Yeah. He spent parts of 4 seasons with Memphis at the AAA level. His first taste with Memphis 2021, 101 innings at a 3.1. It's like, oh, 88 made work. Then in 2022, 135 innings, but at a 5.5. It's like, oh, 88 works for, length. It may not work for results. Then 2023, 94 innings at a 5.53. And it's like, oh, this may not work anymore. I saw him in 2024 and I was just like, how is he a reliever now? Like 87 shouldn't play in a bullpen, but we're gonna see if 87, 88 does play in a bullpen. I don't know how this is gonna work, and I know that I'm 30 minutes removed from saying we're doubting the human element of execution in pitchers, and I sound like a hypocrite right now. But at the end of the day, 89, 90 is different than 86, 87 from 5'11 and not optimal extension or anything like that. Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's nothing in the release that says this guy's unorthodox.
Not a ton. I think that the thing that is the most, I mean, it is a low release, but I don't
Yeah, because
low
he's
release.
5'11.
Yeah, low release for a sinker is not always the best thing in the world, and he also is, you know, it's a low release sinker that gets a ton of run, but I don't see a ton of value to that, so to speak. It is a little bit of like a slingshot-ish arm angle and stuff like that. It's I'm not totally sold on, and I hope I'm wrong. I want to see him have success because he's, stalled out in AAA. And I wouldn't even say it's fair to say stalled because he's put together results. It's just because of the conversation that we're having, teams haven't given him, a shot really yet at the big league level. But the fastball has historically gotten hit pretty hard, and it did last year as well. Opponents hit 322 against it. So the good news with him is he gets those ground balls. The slider is pretty good, and he commands it really well. And so I think the Brewers are hoping for a guy that can just rack up innings when they need them, I guess. But yeah, this is stuff wise, like he's going to have to really execute.
Really, really execute. So,
Another guy that's going to need to execute is the
yeah.
next pick. Phillies took Mike Vasil, but then traded him to the Rays. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I'm more intrigued, naturally. But honestly, I'm kind of surprised that the Rays went this route. So they take him from the Mets. Vassell was a guy that had some helium, going into 24, even like with the way he finished 23, but it
Yep.
was not a good year from him. And, overall, like just really struggled to avoid hard contact. There was some velo fluctuation. Some starts he's 94, other starts he was more 92. But there's nothing that really stands out with him. He is definitely a kitchen sink guy, right? It's going to be sinker, cutter, fastball, slider, changeup, curveball, and he's going to throw all of those at you. Clearly, the Rays see something here, maybe that they can tinker with one of those pitches to get more out of it, or they just think he can grab some innings for them.
Okay, now try your hardest to find what the Rays see. Because like my overarching question is why would the Rays be intrigued by this? Because this is like the pitcher that I feel like Tampa stays away from
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't really know.
Yeah. I'm curious to find out. Like that's not saying oh it's not going to work. I'm curious to see what the Rays see in Mike Vassell to turn this into a big league product.
Yeah, looking at the end of the year, like some of the sinkers were getting like he's getting 16, 17 inches of horizontal, and then he has a four seamer as well that I just don't think plays nearly as well. So maybe leaning more into the sinker thing. The cutter, played pretty well at points that he added to this year. Like I think it's the sinker that they are
Okay.
hoping that maybe they can get a little bit more out of and get this guy to roll ground balls. But yeah, I don't really know. The slider, they love their sliders, and like his slider was not that great this year. It's an interesting ad for them, and I'm very excited to see how they adjust his usage in his arsenal. I'd assume that they're going to trim down from the 6 pitches. They don't seem to
I
be
would
like
I
going
would
to the
think so.
kitchen sink guys, right? Like
Yeah.
so, I'm fascinated to see how the Rays tinker with what Vassal has going on here, and what they see that they think can work in a big league role. I presume would be in the bullpen.
It is kind of nice when your guess is as good as mine because I feel like you always have the answer. Like it's, oh, they could do this, they could do X, they could do Y. It's like, I don't know. And
I got nothing this time, man. I got nothing.
unfortunately for the audience, good for me. It's just like, you know what? We're on the same page. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, those two picks, I wish I had more. Um, Another bit of a surprise was the Braves. They take Christian Cairo,
Yeah,
shortstop, more middle infield type,
yeah.
from the Guardians. I mean, the Guardians have so many of them that we didn't even really know much about Christian Cairo. Cairo 680 OPS this year. He's athletic, and I think they're hoping can just kind of be a bench utility guy type of role. He finished the year a little bit better than how he started it. Um, I don't have a ton there other than very patient, ran a 16% chase rate. And I think they're just hoping he can, again, just be that bench utility infielder type, I guess.
I watched him play 12 games this year, I want to say. And I will tell you, like, when I'm filling out my book, like, when I'm filling out the lineup card, getting ready for a game, Christian Cairo is not somebody that I was like, oh, I'm really excited to see this happen. He played a lot more in Columbus, and I feel like he had a specific spot when Cleveland started doing the Angel Martinez thing and when they traded Tana at the deadline. That's like kind of when you saw the everyday role in AAA blossom for Cairo. But before that, he was like bench utility piece in AAA. And the numbers, like, understandably so. He slashed 233, 356, 314 in 69 games in AAA. He's a high efficiency base stealer. I think they view him as a speed and defensive versatility thing. Um, I This was one where I was like, why him?
Yeah.
So this is the hitting version of Vasil and Connor Thomas.
Yeah, I think that the swing decisions are plus to plus plus. So and have consistently been for the last 2 years. So I think they're hoping the swing decisions translate,
Yeah.
and just kind of keep that floor elevated. And they must like the glove, just up the middle. And he's played some third as well. I mean, they traded for Nick Allen though, so like it's just another versatile infielder, I guess, to add to the fold there. But I can't really add much other than that.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to Christian Cairo, unfortunately. Like, again, I've watched him play a lot of baseball, relatively speaking, and I'm not sure I saw big league Atlanta Brave in Christian Cairo, but here we are.
Before we call it an episode, do you have a couple? I know you have one minor league phase Rule 5 pick that you want
Yeah.
to shout out.
I texted you we up when Hyunil Choi was
Yeah.
taken by the Nats in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft. That was round one. Other guys that jumped out to me, Odanier Mosqueda. I did like the pitch mix when I, watched him previously. He was taken by St. Louis, double A guy for the Yankees. If I'm not mistaken, he was a Red Sox farmhand for a minute as well. But
So,
that was another name that jumped out to me. There were a couple others. Will Wilson, going, the former first round pick out of
yeah,
NC
he had a
State. He's a
rough year.
Guardian now.
He had a
Brutal, like brutal. John Rhodes, the Orioles
hmm
outfielder, was taken by the Dodgers. I know that's a guy that had some prospect intrigue coming into this year.
Steve
Brandon
Hadger.
Stephen Hadger, yep. Hadger goes to Pittsburgh. He was part of that Tyler Malley deal.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then Brandon Komar went to Cincinnati in the second round. Komar is that, swing man. He can eat a bunch of innings kind of guy. There was one more name that I had for you. Where is it? Jack Anderson, our guy that I mentioned as a possible big league Rule 5, went 59th overall in the minor league Rule 5. He's a new Red
Hey,
Sox farmhand. Jack Anderson's going to throw an inning for the Boston Red Sox in 2025, and you're going to see that splitter. I was stunned.
yeah. Hey, 70% strike rate on the slider, 72% strike rate on the fastball, and the splitter was a good pitch for him this year. So I like that. I'll take the over 1/2 inning with you
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Jack Anderson at the big league level. That's a nice little grab.
There we go.
5% walk rate too. It was pretty nuts.
Yeah.
That'll do it for this episode. Again, we have a ton going on next week. We're going to break down all these trades. Hopefully, there's more that come along, more
Yeah.
prospects on the move. Talk a little bit about the draft lottery and some of the top names that can go there. Now, that some of the surprising teams that are picking at the top with the Nationals, the Angels, and the Mariners sneaking into that top 3 spot there. So we will talk about that next week. Have a great weekend. Reminder to check out those eBay auctions, and we look forward to talking prospects with you next week.